Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Welcome, one and all. You are listening to Tiger Claw Radio. I'm your host, Critical Failure. It's that time again. Hope everyone had a wonderful new year. Oh, yeah. It's the 8th of January. Now it feels like the holidays are a million years ago in internet time. Got some van casting coming up for you. I checked out the latest over on Battle of the Bits. We got some chiptunes. We're going to start out with one that I picked up from a competition that's still, the wheels are still turning. But this is from Agara Gara, and it's called Eating a Supernova for Lunch. Stick around, you're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. Welcome, everybody. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. It's a Videocast. Yes, we don't do these with regularity anymore now that I'm working from home. But it is 9:55 p.m. and I'm going on a burrito run. Yeah! I'm going to Chipotle, and I gotta tell you, so excited. I'm going on a burrito run. So very excited. To the point where I should probably be concerned. But anyway, let's talk about some games. There is a game for the Commodore 64 that has somewhat got my attention, and it is called Dark Dungeons, or rather, The Dark Dungeons. And it was a cassette tape game from the 80s. And basically, you've got... They try to make an adventure game, with sort of a Dungeons and Dragons mechanic, but it's there's no graphics. It's just text. But how can I explain it? It's almost like a graphic adventure, okay. Here's how I'd explain this game. It's a text adventure, but it's not parser driven. Instead, it's like, all right. You're in the mystical lake. What do you do now? And then you have a list of commands. And the way they used to do it was really popular. Was instead of programming in a menu where you would go up and down, they would give you a list of the trigger words, and each one you'd press the letter, right? So it'd be attack, search, whatever. And so that would be press A for attack, press S for search, press W for whatever. Now, having done a little programming, I've never programmed in BASIC, but it's more complicated to design a menu where you have a cursor that goes up and down, and then whatever you land on and you press the action button. It just takes more, it's not terribly difficult, but it takes a little bit more programming moxie. And this game, one of the reasons why I really locked on it was because it strikes me as the kind of game that we know C64 as being capable of. This was a guy in his basement who clearly loved Dungeons and Dragons and wanted to make a game, and then here we go. Some things I like about it that are unique is that when it starts, you're in a shop, and instead of saying, a dagger is 10 gold, a potion is 5 gold or whatever, when you're in the shop, it says, this is how much gold you have. These are the items that I have. Make me an offer. And I think that is, for a game that old and that primitive, I thought that was a really neat mechanic. Now, it's a pretty basically programmed game. Like, it doesn't, when it comes to the technical aspect of it, it doesn't seem to have a whole lot of tricks up its sleeve. So I'm willing to bet you could just do process of elimination and figure out what everything costs that way. Or better yet, you could probably just load it up in a text editor and figure it out. But I have a copy of it on my Powkiddy V90 that I played a few times, and this will tell you how comfortable it is to play Commodore 64 games on the Powkiddy V90. Again, this is a text-based game. You cannot play this with a joystick or controller. You have to have a keyboard. And I can play this on the V90, and it just feels right at home. It's pretty great. I was looking this game up on the internet when I was sitting around with my phone, and I had time. It was one of those instances where, like, I had some time, but I didn't have any of the games that I wanted to play were on devices that I didn't have on me, So I just looked it up, and I was doing some reading on it, and I found out, sure enough, it was a cassette-based game. And there are cassettes out there that you can buy on eBay, but I think it's because of the way cassettes degrade. All cassette-based games, for the most part, are bananas expensive. So this was no exception. If I wanted to track down one of these tapes, it was like $110, plus shipping it over from the Netherlands or wherever. So that's out. But I will say there are scans of all that stuff. So if I was really that into it, I could make a tape case for it, that looked authentic, and then maybe stick in a thumb drive that had like Frodo or some sort of Commodore 64 emulator, and there you go. That'd be my tape copy. I've done that with a few other games, or with a couple other games, but not like a single Commodore 64 ROM. Not something that can fit on a floppy disk. So yeah, I'm looking forward to nuzzling up in the bed with a belly full of burrito and playing Dark Dungeons tonight, which will be awesome. And I know the game is going to be bad and janky, and I cannot wait, because this is a game that was created by a single person, or two people with the same last name, probably husband and wife. I don't know, husband and wife, brother or sister, who knows? But two people, same last name, not a company, just some dudes, some people. And I'm really stoked about it. But in the meantime, I'm going to Chipotle, gonna get a burrito, doodly-doo. Yes, not sponsored by Chipotle, but I wish I was. Oh yeah. I was listening to the Beastcast earlier today, as I was rounding out TCR for last week, and Sean was asking, well, what should I talk about on here? He was getting really burned out on popular media. Sean likes to do a lot of those. I just saw X and Y movie or something, and this is why it made me upset. So I'm touching on this on the air because I want him to keep doing what he's doing, but I think there's things that he could talk about that maybe wouldn't make him feel so dejected. So Sean, if you're listening, any stories you have of your youth, I think are fascinating, because the world where when you're in Germany and Hungary and those places, so different, pre-internet, when it was really a big world, that stuff always fascinates me. Like, I never knew anybody who had like a Spectrum or an Amiga or anything like that, but those were big overseas. You mentioned talking about like Golden Age comics and stuff. That'd be pretty cool too. So I hope you keep doing what you're doing. Give me a second here. We're almost in Burrito Town, and in which case everything stops for burritos. I don't even think I want to record on the way home, because I I want to smell the burritos in silence. Oh, yeah. All right, bear with me. Bear with me. Let me make sure I can actually acquire burritos. Otherwise, I'll be screaming a hissy fit all the way home. All right. We are restarting the recording. Whoop, hang on. That's not going to fly. There we go. I have acquired burritos. I am now the proud owner of a steak burrito and whatever my wife ordered for herself. Probably a veggie burrito. She likes guacamole. And I'm on the way home. And I couldn't be more excited. So yeah, so this Dark Dungeons game, I like how primitive it looks. Because one of the things I've noticed is that, to jump topics a little bit about the Pico 8, remember last week I was talking about how I learned a way I could condense my code by a whole lot on Pico 8. And that was really opening doors for me. Well, Pico 8 doesn't really have any RPGs. And there's two big reasons for that. I think the big one is the size limitation of making a game on Pico 8. You can only make them so big. So when you make an RPG, it's so easy for it to get bloated past that limit. And the other is difficulty with saving. So Pico 8, you're able to make it so that it'll save, but it's complicated because the whole concept is that it reads the whatever program you're running, it will read it off an image file. So if you're saving, what are you saving to? Are you creating a file of locally on the drive? Like if I were to relate it to like a DOS machine, you're not saving on the floppy, you'd be saving on your hard drive, right? That means you'd have to install whatever it is. It's possible. I mean, there are games that do it. But the problem is when you get into some of those complicated processes, whatever you're working on, your program loses compatibility. Because some of those features weren't around like for the entire lifespan of the Pico 8. And then some of the other platforms that just emulate, they don't have access to that stuff, particularly RetroArch. So, in order to do a role-playing game, you'd have to do it in such a way where it was a really short experience, or you would just have to accept that save states were a thing. So the reason why I'm talking about this now is because I'm looking at this Dark Dungeons game and just how terribly primitive it is, but it still works. It still manages to create, whoa, look at that guy. He doesn't know there's speed cameras. Oh, hang on one second. I gotta watch this. Flash! By the way, if you live in a state that doesn't have speed cameras, when they go off after dark, the flash is so bright, everybody knows you got a ticket. It's pretty hilarious. Right, so I was talking about Dark Dungeons. It's so primitive, but it still manages to create, an immersive world with just the sparsest of little building blocks. And that part has me fascinated, and I'm wondering if something like that could be recreated. It just uses, again, they didn't break the mold in mechanics. They just roll the six stats for creating a character in Dungeons and Dragons, with the exception of charisma. They left off charisma apparently because if you're not talking to anyone, then what good is charisma? Oh, there's a bike lane. This gentleman is biking, not in the bike lane, but in the middle of the car lane, which is fine normally, but when there's a bike lane, come on, man, use the bike lane. I don't want you to get hurt. Seriously, dude. All right. Right. So, I am going to eat my burrito, and I'm going to play Dark Dungeons. And this is the part where I would like to say I'm going to report back to you and let you know how it goes. But experience has told me what's actually going to happen is once I've completed my evening, I'm going to forget all about it. It's going to hide. The memories are going to hide in the corners of my ADHD-riddled brain, and I will never recall them, especially not when I get back to the office and I sit down in my comfy chair and I get ready to record again. So, that said, I wish I could let you know how it goes, but it's probably not going to happen. I'll see you guys back in the studio. Back again in the studio. Just going to take a quick moment to thank the sponsors. This is a Patreon-sponsored program. They are Darabka, EmeraldRangers.com, and Tecmo Balls. Thank you guys so much. Hope you're enjoying the party. Now, I have 2 more bits that I recorded from the van, and let's go ahead. I don't have any notes as to what I talked about.
All right, then. We're van casting again, everybody.
You're listening to Tiger Claw
All right, give me a second here. It is 2:56 in the afternoon, 34 degrees out in the pouring rain, and we are van casting. We're on our way to a few different places. We're going to Jersey Mike's to get subs. We're going to go get an order of fries from Five Guys. And then, to top it all off, I will be headed to Crack Donald's to get Happy Meals for the kids, for the screaming kids. And then away we go. Okay, so I got to play games a little bit this morning. Not a ton, but a little bit. And spent some time with Launchbox. And this is something that Darabka, the gaming beast, has been talking about recently when we hang out. He's got an implementation of Launchbox that has his old PC games hooked up to it. Specifically, like, Commodore 64, Amiga, all that stuff. And his collection is very, like, he made sure everything worked. So when he does a screen share and he shows it to us, everything has an icon, everything, everything's running. It's pretty crazy, pretty awesome. So, all right, well, let's give it a shot. So I went and downloaded Launchbox for PC, for Windows. And I have what I thought was a ROM set, like a complete ROM set for Commodore 64, a very, very large ROM set. Turned out not to be complete, but more on that later. I hooked it up. You get connected to a database, kind of like IMDb, and then it just automatically scrapes your library and fills out images and stuff. So that worked pretty well. And I sat down with it. I went through and got a bunch of Commodore 64 games from itch.io, and I hooked those up, and a good amount of those that had information for too, which is pretty crazy. To give you a couple of names, Bainsley Badger is one game I really wanted to play. If you've got a Commodore 64, if you got like a C64 Mini, Bainsley Badger is on the C64 Mini, and it was made in like 2017 or 2018 or something like that. It's a newer Commodore 64 game, and I like it because it plays exactly like the game Rocky Memphis and the Temple of Bovazov, which apparently isn't around anymore. So that's really cool. And a bunch of others. The big problem I'm having with it was there's a game called Evil Dungeons that I wanted to play. And I know last week I talked a little bit about the game Dark Dungeons, which I've since given up on. Evil Dungeons is a dungeon crawler, and it's made for the Commodore 64, and there's 2 of them. Evil Dungeons, which is free, and then Evil Dungeons 2, which I paid for. Dungeon crawler, PC, like CRPG, I guess would be the term we would use. So not something you would do with a keyboard, or excuse me, I screwed that up. Not something you would do with a controller. Got to have a keyboard so you can, navigate the menu system and that sort of stuff. You can do it with a controller. It's been done before, but you always lose something in translation. They can never get quite as complex. So I really wanted to play this game. Hooked it up, and by default, Launchbox does all that through Bing Bong. It does all that through RetroArch. That's how it launches everything by default. And RetroArch, apparently, the keyboard keys are all hooked up to shortcut keys that run the emulator, because RetroArch just assumes you're playing with a controller of some kind. So when I try and run this thing, it says, the first thing it says
is English or German, or English or Deutsch, or whatever the actual German word for German is. Starts with a D. So you have to press E for English, and you press D for German. Okay, I'm with you so far. So I try and press E for English, and E is hooked up to like slow motion or something. So it's running the emulation shortcut and not actually pressing E. So whenever you play a keyboard-driven game, you only have access to about half the keyboard, which for Commodore 64 or Amiga or ZX Spectrum or any of those computers where keyboards were built in, it's just not acceptable. Gotta have access to a keyboard. Even on the C64 Mini, where there was no keyboard, they made sure the virtual keyboard was accessible, because even in their curated list, there was a handful of games that required you to press a key or two on the keyboard. So that's what I spent some time working on this morning. And then once I got that hooked up, I'm still working on that Commodore 64 issue. I don't know how to fix that just yet. But I started hooking up some of my like random Windows games that don't really fit anywhere, specifically Angband and NetHack. And then, well, I guess it was only a couple games. Gun Road was another one I wanted to play for a while. That's a light gun game with like anime girls or something. Gun Road, and then also RO9, which is a simple little game that's like 9 dungeon crawlers at once. I made a video for that one, like 8 or 9 years ago, something like that. And then I made an entry for Pico 8 and for Tick 80. And it keeps track of time and the number of times you played, and it's great. I loved it as like a little walled garden, because that's what Steam always did that got me to like Steam. And apparently now I can do that with local games. At one point, if you've been a fan of TCR for a long time, you might remember many years ago, I had like a timekeeper program that was really designed for billing. To like, if you're like a lawyer or something, you would use this to determine billing. And I would just, okay, the project I'm going to be working on today is my ROM for Wizardry 5 for the SNES. Start billing hours. And then I was able to determine how long I'd played any given game, and I would just keep track of it in an Excel spreadsheet, which I think I still have. And that was a great time. This was before GOG Galaxy existed. So if you bought a GOG game, it was just accepted that there was no timekeeping method unless you kept track yourself. So there's that, but that got old pretty quick. I kind of hated doing that. And then from there, I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was called Raptor. There was an internet service where you could keep track of games that way. But it's still like kept the numbers locked off somehow. Like you could only go, you couldn't just say, all right, well, I'm gonna add Fallout, the original Fallout. Now, as per my spreadsheet, I played the original Fallout for 6 hours and 20 minutes. You couldn't just say, all right, 6 hours and 20 minutes or whatever. It would allow you to add time in certain increments, but then that time would have to pass in real time before you could add more. And on top of that, everything was web-based, like web-based in 2007 or something ridiculous like that. So it was like really slow and awkward and stuff, and just that didn't last long. I was pretty happy to see that go. So this seems to be like a good modern day implementation of that. And Launchbox is everywhere. Launchbox is on the Powketty V90. There's an MS-DOS implementation of Launchbox, and they have it built in, at least in the custom firmware that I have. They have it built in to the DOSBox. So if you run DOSBox, it goes straight to Launchbox, the MS-DOS version of Launchbox, which is confusing, but it works, I guess. And so I'm enjoying Launchbox. So big thanks to Sean for introducing me to Launchbox, and I will continue to try and figure out what's going wrong with my Commodore 64 games. And there you go. All right, I just got to Jersey Mike's, so I'm gonna run in and get subs. All right, I think we're in good shape now. See if we can gently back out of this spot.
without making the papers. This way just a wee bit. My wife's car has got one of those, reverse cameras. I don't have that in my car. I've got to be the reverse camera. There we go. All right, we made it. We lived. So, my daughter, the middle child, who's 9 years old now, she is very savvy when she wants to stay up and hang out. A long time ago, she figured out that if she asks me about things I'm interested in, then she'll be able to stay up longer. This is a tactic that I am absolutely powerless to. I know she's doing it. I know I'm being manipulated, but it works every time. What happened last night when it was bedtime was she started asking about the Commodore 64. One thing led to another, and I was explaining it, and I was like, look, and I picked up my C64 Mini, and I was like, look, this is a model of what it looks like. The keyboard is built in. More people who used this machine had keyboards than had joysticks, which is why it's so weird. It's just accepted that you had a keyboard. And then she's like, hey, I should give it a try sometime. So I said, okay. One of my kids is going to try Commodore. So one of my kids just asked me if they could try Commodore 64 sometime. And I just went the wrong way on the road, so now I'm going to have to make a U-turn. Oh, well, that stinks. So I plugged in the C64 Mini at the expense of the Evercade VS. And I gave her the controller. I said, here you go, just give it a spin. I just want you to draw your own conclusions. I'll answer your questions, but just try it out. See what you think. Well, just like me, when I got the C64 Mini, she wandered into Alley Cat, which is like a top-down. It plays like a top-down shmup, but it I don't know how to explain it. It's a top-down shmup, but instead of losing lives, you're losing races or something. It's weird. She's like, oh, this is kind of fun. But then, she realized she couldn't figure it out. And she's like, oh, well, what else you got? And then we moved on to this game. I can't remember what it's called, but it shows up a lot in Commodore 64 collections. It's like a 3D game where you play as a rolling ball that's like, and all the colors are checkered, and you got to jump over the black squares because those are holes in the ground. And really cool looking game, for C64. And she gave it a try, and she was like, okay, I understand this. There's an Android game called Run, it's probably also available in browsers or something. She's like, oh yeah, this is like Run. The problem was the way the game was made. After you, had a try at it, and when it went to the high scoreboard, it expected you to press something on the actual keyboard, to navigate through and start the next game. And she was using the actual joystick that comes with the C64 Mini. Now, if you're familiar with the C64 Mini, you got to get rid of that joystick. I mean, the C64 Mini, it's okay, I guess, but you really got to have some sort of... hold on a second. This is a very tricky thing to navigate here. All right, hold on. I can't remember what I was talking about. You got to get rid of that controller. In practical usage, you're going to get on Amazon, you're going to find some sort of USB SNES controller, hook it up to the C64 Mini, and away you go. It's a good way to do it, and I did it, and you can have a lot of fun that way. What I've discovered is that the C64 Mini, despite being a good machine that I had a good time with, the C64 Mini is not the best way to approach the Commodore 64 if you've never played it before. Now that title goes to the Evercade, because the C64 1 and 2 cartridges for the Evercade, a lot of that draws from the same games the C64 Mini does, and it's a great collection. And it doesn't have the same keyboard issues.
that the C64 Mini has. You still have to have a virtual keyboard, but it functions a little bit better. Instead of pressing a button and then picking virtual keyboard out of a menu, you just press select or whatever and it's on the screen. It's done very, very well. To the point where there were a couple of games that my daughter was asking about in the list, and I was like, just play it on the C64 Mini. It's going to be more fun. So, or not the C64, play it on the Evercade. It's going to be more fun. So that's really cool. And yeah, played some C64 with my daughter, had mixed results. But I will say this, she had more fun with it than she thought she was going to have. She thought it was going to be like, this is going to be a big pile of unplayable garbage, which, let's face it, a lot of C64 games are. But no, she did okay. She had a good old time, which was great. So I'd say that about wraps it up. I will say this, though, and Sean, I hope you're okay with me talking about this, but I was hanging around on Steam a couple nights ago, and if you're online on your friends list, Steam will say what game you have loaded up. Sean was playing Civilization 3. I love Civ 3. Nobody plays Civ 3. Nobody. Everybody loves the latest Civ or Civ 5. There's a small smattering of people that love Civ 4. And the one other person I know that likes vintage Civ is Hemrock, and he likes Civ 2. Nobody likes Civ 3 but me. It's my favorite one. So I got to see him play that. I was like, yes! Somebody's playing Civ 3! Sean, through the ether, let us enjoy Civ 3 together! But nay, it was not to be. And yes, this is an entire story about how I saw somebody playing a very specific game in my Steam account. Civ 3 to me is like the litmus test of a new operating system. When Windows 10 first came out, there was concern that a good amount of games just weren't going to run for it, older ones. And Civ 3 is usually the one my head goes to. Well, will it run an older game, like, say, I don't know, Civ 3? And the reason I go there is because it came out in that era where it was like CD-ROM gaming. It wasn't an MS-DOS game, but it was pre, Steam conquering the world, when people were still buying physical discs and keeping them by their machines. It was still accepted that you have to put the CD in when you want to play the game. So a lot of those games, that's like the prime time for games to fall into obscurity and just not exist anymore. So if it can run Civ 3, then your operating system is okay, for the most part. Yeah, and that is the whole story. With that, I think I'm going to go ahead and shoot you guys back to the studio. I'm sitting outside of a Five Guys right now in the pouring rain. I've got Jersey Mike subs. I'm waiting on Five Guys fries. We're going to go to McDonald's and get a Happy Meals for the screaming kids. And I'll see you guys back in the studio. Have a good one. Back again in the studio. I've got one more that I picked up off of Battle of the Bits. Again, this is stuff that's being submitted. It's not part of a completed collection yet, but it's from Cleater, who shows up on every single one of these competitions, and it's space game with lots of fun and shooting. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio.
this one's going to air, but we'll shoot from the hip and see what happens. So I got 2 T-shirts recently that I absolutely love. But it just so happens that I gained some weight and I fatted out of them, like as soon as I got them. And I'm kind of bummed about it. They are Moonring, the RPG. It's a free game. You can get off Steam. Guy said, hey, I'm going to make it free. Goodwill means more. And so if you wanted to support the game, you could buy a T-shirt. Well, I bought a T-shirt. Love the T-shirt. But I bought a large, and I passed into XL territory. God save me. And so, it don't look so good. On top of that, it's 100% cotton, so it feels wonderful, but it also shrank a little bit. That, and to add insult to injury, also my Wizardry shirt. You gotta understand, I'm not much on video game T-shirts, okay? I know, like, it's a big YouTube, like, cliche, you know, to when you appear on camera, to have your video game T-shirt on. Hey, it's me! You wear, like, it's a Super Mario Brothers shirt, because I like Super Mario Brothers. We're gonna talk about Super Mario Brothers. Like, I was never much for that. I did have a yellow Super Mario Brothers shirt that I got at Epcot Center. I got another Super Mario Brothers shirt for Christmas. And not really my thing, but there are like a couple of exceptions. And I think if you're going to wear a T-shirt for a game, then you want it to be like one of those games that's really obscure but really high on your like favorite games list. So like Wizardry is perfect because there's very few people who really dig it, but the people who do tend to be hardcore about it. And it's a great looking shirt. It's a great looking shirt. It gets better. The shirt's gone from AliExpress. I went to buy a shirt tonight. I was looking up shirts, feeling kind of bummed about getting fat. And I was like, let's find an XL version of that Wizardry shirt. Why not? Let's do it, boys. It was like $12 or something. I can't remember exactly what the amount was I spent on it, but it was not a lot. Sure enough, gone from AliExpress. So, oh well. They have like a Wizardry 6 T-shirt, which is not quite as cool. It has the Wizardry logo, and then it has like a big block with all of the portraits on it. It looks kind of weird, to be honest. Not as cool. Not as cool. So I'm like, what fills that niche of like a weird game, not very well known, but a game that I'm wild enough about to wear a T-shirt for? And I'm thinking like a CRPG hits the spot. It's right in that niche. So what else fits that bill? I looked up Ultima Underworld. I saw a T-shirt with the box art from Ultima Underworld on it, and I was like, okay, maybe. For some reason, maybe it's because I didn't play that game a ton. It didn't quite click with me. I wasn't ready to drop down for a T-shirt. The next T-shirt that I saw that was like, all right, that's a great shirt. It was an Infocom T-shirt. Are you familiar with Infocom? I know I'm even amongst our small group, I'm like the only person who really digs text adventures. But Infocom was the text adventure company, right? Back in the 80s, they made Zork, 1, 2, 3, Wishbringer, Enchanter, all these like text-based games with parsers. That was Infocom, and the T-shirt. It's a gray T-shirt, and it just says Infocom in white in their logo font. And if you don't know what Infocom is, it just looks like a software T-shirt. It doesn't even look like a gaming T-shirt. It's perfect. So that's my pick right now. I'm just about to gas up the car. So one sec, I'm going to pause this so I'm not talking to myself at the gas pump like a weirdo. Uno momento. All right, we're gassed up. So even talking about it now, I think Infocom is the winner. Although I'm tempted to go back and buy another Moonring T-shirt. So the thing is, Infocom, that's an AliExpress T-shirt. And those T-shirts are like, they're $10 to $15. You're getting them from a Chinese press. They're definitely bootleg. Whereas the Moonring T-shirt was from the developers so that they could benefit. So it becomes a $30 T-shirt. So that's kind of a rough. So that's my bit about T-shirts and getting fat. And I don't know how I'm going to work this into an episode of TCR. But whatever. I'll see you guys back in the studio. Back again in the studio. We're going to shift gears. There's some good stuff in the Fail Bag channel on the Discord, which I'm pretty happy about. So this is from Hemrock. He writes, I have a mild interest in these computer collections, although I do not own any to date. I've heard good things about Summer Games 2, I jumped ahead too far. He leaves a trailer to start with for the C64 Collection 3 for the Evercade. Now, if you've paid attention to the Evercade so far, they've got 2 Commodore 64 collections. Got them both. They're really good. And there are a couple of carts that they've announced. Haven't hit the shelves yet, but one of them is the next Commodore 64 collection. So he says, I have a mild interest in these computer collections, although I do not own any to date. I've heard good things about Summer Games 2, Cybernord 1 and 2, as well as Netherworld. Look like decent shmups. Also, it appears to be there's fun to be had with Deliverance and Street Sports Soccer. I'm a sucker for old school soccer games. Actually, I might pick this one up. As an aside, the Home Computer Heroes collection is the only Evercade cart I know of that actually sells for less than MSRP on Amazon, only $19.49 instead of $19.99. There's one other cart that does it. I believe it's the Delphine collection. Check that one out. That's the one that has Another World on it and 3 other games. Also goes for $19.50 instead of $20. But yeah, oh man. I'm thinking back to what I know of those collections, and if you're a sucker for old soccer games, I'm pretty sure one of the carts has a copy of the original Premier Manager on it, which is pretty cool. I got into the Premier Manager series a little bit on Steam for not for a long time, but it was one of those deals where I played Premier Manager for 10 hours inside of a few days, and then just walked away from it and never touched it again. But it was a pretty good bit. All right. 2024 will likely be a good year for the Evercade. Here's some speculation. Highly derived from Crazy Burger's recent YouTube video. Ratings are a certain, likely, maybe, unlikely, remote chance. So let's start at the top, because it looks like he has these in order of likelihood. We've got Indie Heroes Collection 3 and Commodore 64 Collection 3, which are both ones that they have released trailers for. I looked at the game list for Indie Heroes Collection 3, and it's all one-player games with the exception of a 4-player battler. So one thing I'd like to see more of on the Evercade is more like, 2-player games. You kind of have to go to the arcade collections for that. At least that's the opinion that that's the impression that I get from the parts of the Evercade library that I've checked out. But anyway, then we have C64 Collection 3, more Commodore 64 stuff. Then we have the C64 Homebrew Collection, especially from Cytronic Software. Likely. I could see that. That's kind of what the Home Computer Heroes was, where they just took C64 Homebrew and they mixed it with Amiga Homebrew and whatnot, and they gave it its own cartridge. So, unless they have a deal with Cytronics directly, I think it's far more likely that we're going to see a Home Computer Heroes Volume 2, and that's going to include Cytronics on it. Same cart, but instead of if you call it Home Computer Heroes as opposed to C64 Homebrew, then you can throw in whatever else, and it. I don't know. That seems to fit. But I agree. Cytronics definitely has a spot because they got a lot of good stuff. They've also done, if you get a C64 Mini, Cytronics has games on there, so it's not like they haven't worked with this kind of thing before. So yeah, I think that's a good idea. Another Data East collection, likely. Okay, another Jaleco collection, likely. Mega Cats Collection 3, likely. Those 3 I can't really comment on. I don't know. I don't think I have any of those except for Data East. Hang on one second. I need to consult my Evercade library. Yeah, it looks like I have Data East 1 and Data East Arcade 1. And neither one of them really gets played a ton. I mean, some, but I think those are really just the Burger Time carts for me. Let me get back to the list and see where we're at. Commander Keen Collection. Man, oh man. Now there, I think you've got something. Because we've seen I think the Duke Nukem being so successful really opened a door, especially the Duke Nukem 1 and 2 being updated the way they have been, because those are great versions of those games that you can't get anywhere else. So if you play, if you've ever played the original Duke Nukem, it's got a real, it's not very smooth going left and right, but they cleaned all that up. And I would love to see Commander Keen done in the same way. You're talking about games that are they're from the same era, that play a lot, very much the way they used to. And it's also a series where the developers are still active on the scene. So I think that's very likely. Like, you could hit those guys up on Twitter and be like, hey, bro, Evercade, man, you going to see that happen? More out-of-the-bit games like Super Arcade Football. Sounds good. Irem Arcade Collection 2, maybe. I want to say yes just because we have an Irem Arcade Collection 1 that is actually numbered Volume 1. SNK Neo Geo Collection, that makes sense to me because Neo Geo Classics are on absolutely everything. Cave Shmup Collection, I would love that, but I honestly disagree. I think it fits in every way, except that cave games tend to be overpriced. If you look at Steam, the regular price for Dodonpachi alone is $30. So if they manage to do that, which would be what? It would be Mushihime-sama, which is normally $20, and probably Dodonpachi Revolution, which is normally $30, and maybe, if we're lucky, Death Smiles. If they manage to jam all that into a $20 cartridge, then I would be very surprised. It would be a heck of a card. I mean, it would be beneficial. I'm sure it would sell, but well, who knows? Pandemonium 1 and 2, I think that's far more likely, because I don't think those games are nearly as protected as cave games. Sega Collection, this is marked as unlikely. I haven't seen the source video where he's pulling this from, but that could be. We've got Sega Collection. Sega's out of the hardware game, man. We've got Sega on Steam. We've got Sega everywhere else. Why not? Especially now that Evercade's like a couple years in, and Duke Nukem was just really successful. I could see there being a Sega Collection, and I could see it doing really well too. There's already, like, if you count, I guess it doesn't really count, but if you look at like the Sydney Hunter Collection, we've already got a Master System game on the Evercade. We just need some licensed stuff. I could totally see that happening. Capcom Collection, unlikely. From what I understand, there are some licensing issues with the Capcom games that are on, like the Capcom handheld. They only licensed their stuff specifically for handheld use and not for cartridge use, which is weird, but that's what they wanted. And to be perfectly honest, when it comes to Capcom, unless you're talking about Mega Man, and I guess there are some exceptions, but at least when it comes to like their like fighting games and stuff, I don't know. I could take it or leave it, I guess. It would be nice to get a solid fighter, because we need more like 2-player stuff. Because we have this, the Evercade VS is this awesome like couch multiplayer system that actually comes with 2 high quality, packaged in controllers. And there's very few games outside of the arcade collections that actually, are good for that. So, I don't know. Shovel Knight Collection, unlikely. Don't know about that. Namco Arcade Collection, never going to happen. Never. Because Hemrock, I know you're aware of this, but if you, for those of you who aren't in the loop, the first couple cartridges to come out for the Evercade were Namco cartridges. And they had a similar, like, weird licensing issue to Capcom. They only licensed the games for handheld use. So, when the console came out, the VS, the one I have, they had to actually lock out their own games for that reason. So they will only work on the Evercade handhelds. Now, that smells an awful lot like Magic the Gathering's whole, what's their term? The restricted list? The something like that? Yeah. Never again. That is never happening again. And if they do, I'm not buying it. So I think I think yeah, no, I don't think so. Konami collection could happen just because you're talking about a company that has collections on everything again. However, they still in their weird pachinko phase? Because that's the only reason why I think it wouldn't happen, because they're spending all their time making pachinko games and pinball games or whatever over in Japan. And then you come to the Tomb Raider collection, which I would have thought it would have been a perfect fit, especially since you're talking about like a system that's had PS1 games on it before. But there's two things I can think of that would stop that from happening. One is that we have the Tomb Raider HD games that have just come out or are just coming out. The original Tomb Raider trilogy, they cleaned them up, they re-released them. So that's one thing. So if they put the old PlayStation games out, it doesn't really mesh. Secondly, I don't know exactly how much fits on an Evercade cartridge. Okay, but a PS1 game, for the most part, they're pretty space intensive. So I don't think you could fit I don't know. I'd be interested to see if you could fit 3 Tomb Raider games on a collection on a single Evercade card. So I think you can do 2, right? You can do 2 PS1 games. Are there any? I'm trying to think, because I know the Worms collection only has 1, right? Because it's got a Worms Armageddon for the PlayStation, then it's got like a couple of Super Nintendo games or something. Wow, I really don't know. I think that would be a technical limitation, but it sure would be awesome, wouldn't it? But that's cool. That was a really awesome list. I think if you look at around like the YouTubes or the internets to see what Evercade players are talking about, there's a lot of this speculation of what cartridges would come out in the future, and I think that's a really good sign. Because a lot of the things people are saying when they're just guessing, or whatever, a lot of it sounds really plausible. One of the things that perked my interest was if you go to the Evercade Discord, there's a whole section for like, what's your dream cartridge? And again, you've got some crazy stuff, but it's all, it's plausible. The one I posted for Never Gonna Happen would be an RPG Maker cartridge, because we already have RPG Maker in for PS1 in English, and then finished translating RPG Maker, the SNES 1 and 2. And there you go, a PS1 game and two SNES games would fit nicely on a cartridge. Be the first time they'd ever released on Super Nintendo, and they would be perfect. And I guarantee you it's never going to happen. Another really good one would be a Wizardry cartridge. I think that would fit perfectly. You get Wizardry 5 on the SNES. You could finish translating Wizardry 6 on the SNES, which is a very console-friendly version of a non-console-friendly game. And then maybe the NES games, and then there you go. That's an amazing collection. Somebody mentioned that on the Discord, and it got a few people backing it up. Not like a huge crowd, but there were like a couple of Wizardry fans like, yeah, that'd be cool. So that was cool to see that game get a little shine. But yeah, it's a fun time for the Evercade. There's definitely a feeling of like a thriving, developing world, thriving, developing catalog. We're excited to see what the next games are, right? Which is something it's like I haven't seen in a while. Definitely need more RPGs, man. Holy goodness. They need to fix that. All right, let's see where we're at here. It looks like I'm having a bit transfer issue. Hang on one second. All right, there's one more thing in the in the Failbag channel, and he talks about, if you're looking for some good content, see below. This may prompt an interesting monologue, and I wasn't expecting to get that far into the Evercade stuff, but let's see what he has. We have Pigsy's retro game dev tutorials, 32 new Sega Genesis and Mega Drive games in development in 2024. All right, let me pause the recording, and I'll give this a watch. All right, I watched this video. Do you remember, Hemrock, when you were still with the Retro League and you were super excited about Pure Solar? because not only was it a new RPG, it was one new game coming out for the Sega Genesis. One new game. I watched this video and I was pretty overwhelmed. Now, granted, that's not entirely a fair statement because Pure Solar, for better or for worse, you know, whatever we think of it now, it was a fully featured RPG that came out. Whereas you watch this video, a lot of these are shmups, you know, simpler games. And I think the big thing is that the tools you have to build a Sega Genesis game from the ground up are different now than they were then. And I think that's really what it boils down to, is the tool chain and the workflow. All right, so let's name some names. Let me pop this thing open again. Hang on. Well, I'll tell you what. The first one that was like I checked out as like a potential game to get is a game called Gunslugs, and that's not even like in the list. They were like, oh, by the way, do you remember last year this game came out called Gunslugs? Give you a little background. Gunslugs is a game by Orange Pixel that came out. It wasn't originally developed for this, but it was actually one of the Ouya games. Orange Pixel made a bunch of Ouya games because they were already making Android games at the time, and I think they just ported them over to the Ouya. Now they're all on Steam, so I've got it on Steam, and it's a fairly simple game, but it is a lot of fun. And when I'm clicking around on AliExpress, I have seen a Sega Genesis Gunslugs cart floating around on AliExpress for quite some time now. I dismissed it as a bootleg, but now I know it's a real game. So I wanted to see how could I get a hold of this, and in such a way where the developer gets paid, because I don't see the point in getting the AliExpress cart for a cartridge that's readily available. That, you know what I mean? And it's like $10 if you just want the ROM, which I think is reasonable, and about $20 or so plus whatever shipping is, $20 or $25 for the loose cart, and then it's like $45 if you want like complete in box, which I think is priced reasonably. I'm not gonna take it just because it's still Gunslugs, which I have on Steam. Again, great game, but if you've never played it, I have to recommend jumping over to Steam, where it's a regular price $5, or at the very least, just get the ROM and play it on a portable handheld device. It's just a terrible thing to say. It really is, because I want to support what these guys are doing, but it's a game we've already had. Whereas the rest of that list, Heavy Recoil looks awesome. Some of the games that are like, there are a couple other quote-unquote games we already had that are a little bit more impressive. There's a Star Fox port that looked really sweet. The original Star Fox, which now, looking back, it seems like I'm the only one who likes, but it's a good game. What are you going to do? Heavy Recoil looks good. But back to games that we've had already. City Connection looks really good. City Connection for the NES is one that I really, really enjoy. And this looks much closer to like the MAME game. Yeah, the arcade port. So props on that. And a lot of good stuff here. This is pretty awesome. And this is all in 1 year too, which is crazy. That is an absolute explosion. I'm curious how many games we were getting a year on the actual Sega Genesis in its heyday. Now, granted, it's way more than this, I'm sure, but I'm looking at this list, and this is like more desirable games than we got on the Ouya in its heyday, for sure. Ouya had some good games. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it, but not this many. That's great. That's really awesome, man. I'll have to sit down with my Sega Genesis tonight. Not just the not just the portable handheld, but I still have my Model 2 hooked up. I was cleaning up the office today, and on my little tube TV, I've got the Model 2. I've got a SNES. Both of those are authentic, and I have my clone NES because it works with my Famicom games. And I go back and forth between those machines quite a bit. But I haven't actually loaded up the Genesis in a little while. The last time I was big into Genesis was when I got that Evercade cart, and I made some videos about that, and that was a good time. But yeah, would love to give it a chance again. All right. Is that the extent of what we have on the Failbag channel? I think it might be. Big thanks to Hemrock for those. Oh yeah, there's more. About a week ago, and we're already late. We're approaching the hour mark, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. A new release of the Miu firmware for the Powkitty V90, and it looks like it's going to be their final one. And I gotta say, I've enjoyed the V90 very much, but I'm still running the firmware that was on it when Hemrock sent it. You know, give you a little background. Hemrock sent me my V90, and before he sent it, he stacked it up with custom firmware because it was already accepted that that's better than the stock stuff. Sent it over, and it's been in the holster ever since. Hasn't always been my main machine, because I've gone through a number of handhelds since then, but it's always been in the holster, at least second tier. And right now, it's the number one. The number one handheld, even more so than the 505 or whatever the really fancy one is that I ended up buying last year. And he sent me a screenshot of the major updates. A new TV out feature. Connect to any TV via the headphone jack using an AV cable, usually included in the console. Okay, that's pretty awesome. So that means that the headphone jack must actually be an audio-video out as opposed to just headphones, which would be really awesome. I actually like that feature. I've only got a surprisingly low amount of my handhelds can do that. The only one that I can think of off the top of my head that can do it is the RG300, which the very, very old RG300, which can do it, but it's pretty unstable. Like I did it a few times, but not very often. New USB driver features connect to the PC easily via USB to transfer as its external controller and access to the terminal and console. That is great, because even now, with my new fancy computer, I've got this junky looking micro SD card port that's just sitting on top of it, specifically so that I can interface with my V90. So I can trade Commodore 64 games back and forth. We've got a safer file system, introduced a new file system, BTRFS, which allows unsafe shutdown to prevent data corruption. Yes, that's been my biggest complaint with this machine, is the unsafe shutdown, which is I'm sometimes forced to do, and then I have to wait through a big, long, a fat 32 data check. And Hemrock has told me you can turn that off, but I can't, which makes me think I'm already not using the most recent version of this firmware. Built-in RetroArch, popular multi-emulator, is now included with the CFW with the latest mainline updates. I'm pretty sure the one I have is already using an old RetroArch version. One for all, one single CFW image install file for all supported consoles. That is great. That means, I should continue to be able to pop this baby out and put it in my Q90, which I just got up and running again. And fully working source code. This means more frequently updated, this is what it says. This means more frequently updates and patches, which I'm assuming that's a typo. But yeah, I'm ready to update the firmware for the V90. I think it's time. I better do it now before I have a save file for the Commodore 64 that I can't live without, because I've been playing a good bit of C64 on that thing. It's better to play C64 on that thing than it is on Launchbox or on my $1,200 PC, which is absolutely bananas. Well, we made it past an hour, boys and girls. I hope everyone is having an awesome week. I know I am. It feels better than I have in quite a bit. And whatever it is you got lying ahead of you here in this crazy world, I want you to know I'm rooting for you. Keep getting out of bed in the morning. Keep doing what you got to do. We'll do the best we can. I'll see you next week.